Have you ever wondered why some women, despite all appearances of sweetness and innocence, hold deep weaknesses that can be exploited, hidden behind those soft gazes and gentle smiles? It's never just about tenderness. It's never just about romance. There's something more subtle, more primal, a vulnerability that lies beneath the surface, carefully concealed even from themselves. You might think it's just chance. You might believe it's your own insecurity. You might say, she's just sensitive. She's just different. But the signs were always there, right in front of you. When you see it through the piercing clarity of Carl Jung's psychology, when you trace the shadows of the feminine psyche, you discover that these weaknesses are not flaws. They're archetypal truths, timeless patterns woven into the soul. It was never about your worth. It was never about your mistakes. It was about a hidden hunger, a need for safety, for approval, for power that shapes how she loves, how she breaks, how she survives. And here's the unsettling part. She may not even realize it. It's instinct. It's shadow. It's the part of the female soul that no one wants to acknowledge. But it's there. This is why. These weaknesses will always exist. In this video, we're going to expose the unconscious patterns that make even the strongest woman vulnerable, how these hidden feminine weaknesses can be both her softest tenderness and her deepest trap. Get ready, because once you see these truths, you can never unsee them. 1. The need for attention. She walks into the room and all eyes turn. But it's not just the beauty that captures them. It's something deeper. A subtle magnetic pull that seems to radiate from her very being, almost like an invitation to see, to notice, to validate her existence. Carl Jung would tell us that behind this almost unconscious performance lies a profound and primal need, the need for attention. For many women, this need isn't just about vanity or shallow flattery. It's a deep, almost archetypal longing, a desire to be seen, to be known, to be affirmed in the eyes of another. This need, Jung said, often takes root in the shadow, the part of us we deny or hide because it feels too vulnerable to expose. And for women, attention can become both a balm and a drug. It soothes old wounds of rejection, of childhood neglect, of being overlooked. But it can also create a kind of dependency, a cycle of seeking and feeding that never truly satisfies. She might not even realize it. She might say she doesn't care who notices. She might play it off with a laugh or a shrug. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet hunger that can't be ignored. Jung's work suggests that this isn't about shame or blame. It's about understanding the unconscious forces that shape our desires. For a woman, attention is often tied to survival, to feeling safe in a world that can be cold and indifferent. It's also tied to her sense of worth, a mirror that reflects back her own radiance or leaves her feeling invisible. When she gets attention, even for a fleeting moment, it's as if the world confirms her place in it. She matters. She's alive in the eyes of others. But here's the shadow side. Attention can become an addiction, a way to avoid the deeper work of self-awareness and self-love. She might hop from man to man, conversation to conversation, always needing that rush of validation, and always left with the same emptiness when it fades. For a man who sees this, the first step isn't judgment, it's clarity. It's recognizing that this isn't just her personal quirk or a flaw. It's an archetype, an ancient pattern playing out through her life. The danger lies in mistaking attention for love, in believing that if you feed her need, she will stay. But the truth is, attention is a fleeting currency. If she hasn't faced the emptiness beneath it, no amount of your focus will ever be enough. So what can you do? See her. Truly see her. Not just her surface beauty or the way she lights up when you look at her. See the longing underneath. Understand that it's not your job to fill that void. It's hers. This doesn't mean you withhold your gaze or your admiration. It means you don't lose yourself trying to be her constant source of light. Because in the end, the only light that truly matters is the one she finds within. Jung believed that the greatest gift we can give each other is authenticity, the courage to look honestly at our own shadows and the shadows of those we love. When you see her need for attention, hold it with compassion, but don't mistake it for a permanent truth. She can learn to see herself. She can learn to find her worth in her own eyes, not just in yours. And in that quiet recognition, you give her something no crowd of admirers ever could: the chance to be real, the chance to be whole. Attention, in the end, is just a symptom. The real journey is always deeper, into the places she's been afraid to look, the places where her true power waits to be claimed. And when she does, she will no longer need the world's gaze to feel alive. She will no longer need to be noticed to know her worth. She will stand in her own light, unshaken, unafraid, and undeniably radiant. 2. Emotional vulnerability. She might laugh easily, smile softly, and carry a warmth that seems to light up every space she enters. But beneath that softness lies a tender ache that few ever see. A quiet, trembling vulnerability that shapes every word she speaks and every glance she gives. Carl Jung would remind us that this vulnerability is not weakness. It's the very essence of the feminine soul. It's an openness to life, to feeling everything so deeply that the world can feel overwhelming at times. But it's also a place of hidden wounds, places where past hurts, betrayals, and losses have left their mark. This vulnerability is her secret doorway into intimacy. It's what draws you in, what makes you feel needed, what awakens your own instinct to protect and cherish her. But here's the truth. That same vulnerability can be her greatest weakness. When a woman hasn't fully embraced this tenderness within herself, she can become a prisoner of it. She might let fear of rejection shape her every move, or let old insecurities decide how she shows up in love. She might crave closeness but pull away the moment it feels too real, too risky. Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine aspect within us all, as a mirror to our inner life. For her, this vulnerability is a double-edged mirror. It reflects both her capacity for deep love and her deepest fears. It whispers to her that she is soft and precious, yet also exposed and unguarded. In relationships, this can become a silent battle. She might test your devotion, seeking constant reassurance that you won't abandon her. She might retreat into silence when she feels slighted, afraid to show how much she truly cares. Or she might give everything too quickly, hoping that by loving harder she can soothe the old ache inside. But none of these strategies truly heal the wound, because at the core, this vulnerability is a sacred place she must face alone. No man, no matter how loving or patient, can fill that gap for her. Your role is not to fix her or to rescue her from her own tenderness. It's to stand beside her, to honor the gentle strength it takes to feel so much and to keep going anyway, to remind her, gently but firmly, that real love doesn't demand that she hide her softness, nor does it require her to bleed for approval. In the light of Jung's teachings, we see that emotional vulnerability is the bridge between who she appears to be and who she truly is. It's the crack in the armor, the place where her soul peeks out. It's also the place where she can lose herself if she's not careful, giving too much of her heart to those who haven't earned it, or shutting it away out of fear of being seen. For you, the path is clarity. Recognize this vulnerability for what it is, not a flaw, but a precious doorway, one that leads to a depth of love that most people never touch, if she learns to stand in it without letting it consume her. Because once she does, she becomes unstoppable. Her softness no longer holds her hostage. It becomes her power. Her tears no longer make her feel small. They make her human. And in that humanity, she finds a quiet, unshakable strength that no one can ever take from her. So honor her vulnerability. Don't pity it. Don't exploit it. And above all, don't try to erase it. In that tender, trembling heart is the seed of something fierce, the kind of love that can weather every storm and still come out stronger. And when you see that, you'll realize that this so-called weakness is actually the foundation of her greatest power. 3. The craving for validation. She says she's fine without it, that she doesn't need anyone's approval to feel complete. Yet beneath those confident words, there's a quiet, persistent craving. The need to hear, again and again, that she is enough. Carl Jung believed that the self is always seeking wholeness, always reaching for some sense of completeness. For a woman, validation can feel like a shortcut to that wholeness. It's the warm embrace of being seen, the soft glow of being cherished, a mirror that confirms her worth in the eyes of the world. But here's the thing. When validation becomes the primary source of her worth, it's never enough. No matter how much you tell her she's beautiful, brilliant, or irreplaceable, there's always a new echo of doubt, a new whisper that says, what if it's not true? This is the cycle of external validation, a loop that never ends because the real hunger isn't out there. It's inside her. Jung spoke of the shadow as the part of ourselves we hide or deny. For many women, the craving for validation is a shadow they carry, a need they don't want to admit because it feels like weakness. But the truth is, it's simply a part of being human. We all want to be seen. We all want to be chosen. The danger comes when this craving defines her, when every compliment becomes a fix, and every moment of silence becomes a crisis, when her sense of self shrinks to fit the size of someone else's gaze. You'll see it in the little ways she asks for reassurance, the questions that seem harmless, the glances that beg for you to notice. And you'll see it in the way she blooms when you do, as if your attention is the sun and she can finally open her petals. But you'll also see how quickly she wilts when that light fades, how easily she doubts herself, questions her value, and searches for new ways to earn back the glow she lost. For a man, it's tempting to become the endless giver of validation, to keep pouring out compliments and affection, hoping to fill the empty spaces in her heart. But Jung would say that this only deepens the shadow. It keeps her looking outward, never inward. Real healing begins when she dares to face that emptiness without flinching, when she learns to see her own worth, even in the absence of praise, when she realizes that no one can give her the peace she's been searching for, because it's hers to claim. Your role? It's to remind her of that truth, even when she resists it. To love her, yes, but also to challenge her to stand in her own light. To show her that your admiration is real, but it is not the foundation of her soul. Because when she learns to validate herself, when she no longer needs the constant echo of approval, she becomes radiant in a way no one else can define. She becomes free. And in that freedom, she discovers something no compliment can ever give her, the quiet certainty that she is, and always has been, enough. 4. Fear of abandonment. She might never say it out loud, but it's there, a quiet, anxious whisper in the back of her mind. Will you leave me too? This fear of abandonment shapes her in ways she doesn't always understand. Carl Jung would say it's rooted in the primal need for connection, an ancient longing to feel safe in the presence of another. It's instinct. It's survival. But it's also the shadow, the place where her deepest fears about love and loss take shape. You'll see this fear in her hesitations, the way she sometimes holds back or gives too much too quickly. It's in the questions she doesn't ask out loud, the silent prayers that you'll stay even when she pushes you away. She might not even be aware of how much it shapes her behavior, how it drives her to test you, to prove your loyalty, to make sure you're really there for her. Jung believed that these unconscious patterns often come from early wounds, the moments in childhood when love felt conditional, or when someone important walked away. For a woman, these memories can echo in every new relationship, whether she realizes it or not. She might become the caretaker, the one who gives everything, hoping it will keep you close. Or she might become the temptress, using her beauty and charm to bind you to her. Either way, it's not about manipulation, it's about fear. The fear that if she doesn't hold on tightly enough, she will be left alone again. For a man, it can feel like a heavy burden. You might wonder why she seems so sensitive, so quick to see rejection where there is none. But this isn't about you. It's about the stories she carries in her bones, stories that were written long before you met her. The healing begins when she sees that fear for what it is, a shadow, not a prophecy. When she learns that no matter how tightly she clings, she can never make someone stay. That true connection is built not on desperation, but on the courage to be vulnerable and the willingness to let go. Your role? To offer her a safe place, yes, but not to become the source of her safety. To remind her again and again that love is not about possession, that the only person she can never lose is herself. Because when she faces that fear, when she learns to stand in it without letting it consume her, she becomes free in a way that no one can ever take away. She no longer lives in the shadow of abandonment. She lives in the light of her own wholeness. 5. The game of control. She may not even realize she's doing it. The way she plans every step, tests every word, measures every response. It's not always a conscious game. More often, it's a reflex, a way of protecting the fragile parts of herself that she fears are too soft, too exposed. Jung taught that the drive for control often hides in the shadow, the place where we stash all the parts of ourselves we can't bear to face. For a woman, control can be a shield, a way to feel safe in a world that often feels unpredictable and threatening. You'll see this in the little ways she tries to guide the narrative. The subtle tests, the careful distance, the sudden bursts of affection followed by silence. It's not manipulation in the sense of malice. It's survival. A way to keep her heart safe from the chaos of love. She might set the rules when she texts, how she lets you in, how she keeps you guessing. She might retreat just enough to make you chase her, then pull you back in with a smile or a glance. To you, it might feel like a dance, thrilling and confusing all at once. To her, it's the only way she knows how to stay in control of what feels too big to trust. But here's the paradox. The more she tries to control, the less she actually feels in control. Because real intimacy, the kind that heals and transforms, doesn't follow rules. It doesn't bend to her tests or her careful plans. Jung believed that true power lies in surrender, the willingness to let go of the need to control and trust the process of connection. But for her, that feels terrifying. Because to let go is to risk everything. To let go is to say, here I am, completely, take me or leave me. For a man, the key is to see through the game without getting trapped in it, to recognize that behind every test is a fear, behind every rule is a wound, and behind every moment of distance is a heart that wants to be loved, but doesn't yet trust that it can be. Your job is not to play the game better than her. It's to refuse to play it at all. To stay grounded in your own truth, your own clarity. To offer her the one thing control can never give, the freedom to be herself, even in her messiest, most unguarded moments. Because when she finally puts down the shield of control, when she realizes that she doesn't have to orchestrate every move to be loved, she discovers a freedom far greater than any she could ever create by force. And in that freedom, she begins to taste the kind of connection that doesn't need to be managed or manipulated, because it's real. 6. The shadow of pleasure. She knows how to draw you in, how to captivate you with a single look, how to weave a spell with her smile. But behind that sensual confidence lies a deeper mystery, the shadow of pleasure. Carl Jung would call this the dance between anima and animus, the eternal interplay of masculine and feminine energies. For a woman, pleasure is both an invitation and a risk. It's the place where she feels most alive and most exposed. Pleasure for her isn't just about the act. It's about the feeling of being seen, wanted, claimed. It's the rush of being desired, the electricity of connection. And yet, it can also become a trap. She might chase that spark over and over, seeking it in new bodies, new experiences, never realizing that what she's really seeking is herself. Because the shadow of pleasure is this: when the pursuit of ecstasy becomes a way to avoid the deeper work of self-acceptance. Jung taught that the feminine shadow often hides in the body, in the places where she feels both powerful and afraid. She might use pleasure as a way to prove her worth, to feel powerful in a world that tells her she's small. Or she might retreat from pleasure altogether, fearing its intensity, its rawness. For a man, it's easy to mistake this as simple seduction, to think it's all about the physical. But the truth is, what she wants most isn't just to be touched. It's to be seen, to have someone look past her body and see the soul inside it. If you chase only her pleasure, if you make it your mission to fulfill every fantasy, you may feed her craving, but you'll never touch her heart. Because what she craves most isn't ecstasy. It's the safety to be fully alive in her own skin. Your role is not to tame her pleasure or to control it. It's to honor it, to see it as the sacred, living force it is, to help her remember that her body is not a tool for validation. It's a temple, a place where her soul speaks in whispers of longing and delight. When she learns to own her pleasure, not as a performance, but as a birthright, she becomes unshakable, no longer seeking outside what she already carries within, no longer trading her radiance for fleeting thrills. And in that ownership, she becomes truly free. 7. The fear of being seen. She might post the perfect photo, tell the perfect story, but there's always a part of her she keeps hidden, a part she fears is too raw, too messy, too real. Jung would say this is the shadow at play, the place where her need to be accepted collides with her fear of being judged. It's a battle she often fights alone, the longing to be known, and the terror of what might happen if she truly is. You'll see this in her hesitation to speak her truth, her quick deflections when the conversation gets too deep. She might talk about everything and nothing, carefully curating what you see so she doesn't have to show you what's underneath. She might even convince herself that she's open, that her curated self is the whole truth. But deep down, she knows there are parts of her that still live in the dark. parts that ache to be seen, but fear they'll be too much. For a man, this can be confusing. You feel close to her, but also kept at arm's length. You sense there's more passion, more wisdom, more soul, but she holds it back, afraid it will cost her your love. Jung taught that we all wear masks, personas that help us navigate the world. But when the mask becomes the only face we show, we lose touch with the self beneath it. For her, the path to freedom is not in becoming perfect. It's in letting go of the need to be perfect. It's in realizing that the parts she hides are often the most beautiful. Your role is to see her, not just the polished surface, but the hidden places she's afraid to reveal. To offer her the safety to be real, without judgment or expectation. To remind her gently that you don't love her mask. You love the woman underneath. Because when she finally lets herself be seen, fully, deeply without apology, she discovers a strength she never knew she had. She becomes more than just the sum of her roles and her image. She becomes whole. 8. The secret of the unconscious. She might think she's in control, that she chooses who she loves, what she wants. But beneath the surface, the unconscious is always at work, shaping her desires, her fears, her every decision. Jung believed that the unconscious is the hidden river that runs beneath every choice we make. For a woman, this river carries the stories of her mother, her ancestors, her earliest heartbreaks. It shapes what she finds irresistible and what she finds terrifying. She might find herself drawn to the same kind of man over and over, never understanding why. She might sabotage love just as it gets close, or chase it so fiercely it slips through her fingers. It's not about logic. It's about the deep, ancient patterns she carries inside. Patterns she may not even see, but that live in the way she loves, the way she trusts, the way she holds herself back. For her, the real power comes in turning inward, in asking the hard questions. What am I really looking for? What am I afraid of? What part of me still lives in the past? Jung taught that the unconscious doesn't have to be an enemy. It can be a guide, a map to the places where her true self is waiting, but only if she dares to look. Your role is not to force her to see these truths. It's to walk beside her as she uncovers them, to hold space for the woman she is becoming, even as she lets go of the woman she thought she had to be. Because when she faces the unconscious, when she stops fearing the shadows and starts listening to them, she becomes a force of nature, no longer driven by fear, no longer trapped in old patterns. She becomes the author of her own life. And in that ownership, that quiet, powerful reclamation, she finds a love that doesn't just echo the past, but creates a future entirely her own. 9. The need to be chosen. She may never say it outright, but deep down, she wants to be the one you pick above all others. It's more than a romantic fantasy. It's an ancient hunger woven into the feminine soul. Carl Jung would call this the archetype of the beloved, the longing to be singled out, to be seen as uniquely worthy. For a woman, this need can feel like life itself. You'll see it in the way she watches you when other women are around, the way she brightens when she feels special. It's not about vanity. It's about the deep-rooted fear that if she isn't chosen, she isn't enough. She might not even realize how much this need shapes her. It can make her settle for crumbs of affection or cling to someone who doesn't deserve her heart. It can make her doubt herself every time she sees you hesitate. Jung believed that our longing to be chosen is really about wholeness, the part of us that wants to be mirrored, affirmed, made real in the eyes of another. But when this longing becomes her only measure of worth, it traps her in a cycle of seeking and despair. For you, it's tempting to play the hero, to promise her the world, But true love doesn't grow in the soil of constant reassurance. It grows when she sees that her worth was never dependent on you at all. Your role is to honor her, to choose her with your actions, not just your words. But also to remind her that even if you walked away, she would still be whole. Because the real choice she's waiting for is the one she makes for herself. When she sees that, when she claims her own worth separate from any man's gaze, she becomes unshakable. No longer a prisoner of someone else's choices. She becomes her own, chosen, cherished, complete. 10. The weight of expectations. She's been taught her whole life to be everything. Beautiful, kind, strong, sweet, the perfect balance of every trait a man could desire. But these expectations can become a cage, locking away her truest self. Carl Jung understood that the collective psyche, the voices of family, culture, history, weigh heavily on the feminine soul. A woman can feel this pressure like a constant hum in the background, telling her she must be more, or she is not enough. You'll see this weight in the way she second-guesses herself, in the way she apologizes for wanting too much, or hides her real opinions to keep the peace. She might try to mold herself into whatever she thinks you want, never realizing that in doing so she loses touch with her own desires. This isn't weakness, it's a survival instinct. A way to be safe in a world that has too often told her she is too much or too little. But Jung would say that these expectations are part of the collective shadow, a weight that isn't truly hers to carry. The real work begins when she starts to see the difference between what she's been told to be and who she really is. For a man, the greatest gift you can offer is to refuse to add to that weight. To let her know she doesn't have to be perfect, that you love her precisely because she is real, flawed, and human. And for her, the power comes in dropping the mask, in standing up and saying, "I am enough as I am." When she does, she no longer lives in the echo of others' voices. She lives in her own truth. And in that truth, she finds the freedom to be everything she was always meant to be, on her own terms. In the end, all these hidden weaknesses, these shadows, are not just flaws to fix or games to master. They are windows into the feminine soul, revealing how deep, how mysterious, and how powerful a woman's inner world truly is. And in this channel, we believe that understanding these truths isn't about manipulation or control. It's about respect, clarity, and above all, the courage to love without illusions. Because when you see her for who she really is, not the mask, not the weakness, but the whole, you'll find that the greatest power is not in making her yours, but in witnessing her become her own.